So recently I was in a conversation and someone said to me that what you say is your writing. So what they were saying is that in order to be a writer, I don't just have to put pen to paper. I can just write my story through my words. So here's my story for you. It's not going to be a piece of paper writing. It's going to be this. This is my story. My story is that this morning I was talking to my daughter about friendships because she has this boy that she knows. It's always a boy. He's a friend, but he's like 4 years older than her, 4 years older than her. And he used to live in our neighborhood. And when he lived in our neighborhood and he first met her, he thought my 5-year-old daughter was like this really cool kid. And he would come by, and it was COVID, so he would come by in the neighborhood and knock on the door. And yeah, I know it's COVID, but it was later in the COVID period where people were doing a little bit more mingling, right? Anyway, so he would come by and he would knock on the door with his like crew of boys and he would want to play with my 5-year-old who was home with me because she's in preschool and preschool was closed, and so I was mom schooling her for a good amount of time, right? And working at the same time, and she never went out with these boys because COVID, and I mean more than that, she was 4 at the time, and I'm not letting a 4-year-old girl go hang out with a bunch of 7, 10-year-old boys. So she didn't, but he came regularly, right? Then he moved out of the neighborhood. Fast forward 2 years, and we start kindergarten, and he happens to be in her kindergarten, so he moved not too far, right? And he goes to her kindergarten. He's not in kindergarten. He goes to her school, and he's a 5th grader. And she was wondering, like, why aren't we friends anymore? So I was trying to explain to her the idea that some people come into your life and they're there for a season. Like, they're there just for a moment, right? And it's great because, you know, you met this kid and he was a really cool kid. And, you know, when your brothers went with you or I went with you, you got to hang out with him. We saw him at the pool. You got to know him. He was a really nice, good kid. And you made a connection. Maybe you were friends, like starting to be friends, whatever. But when you don't keep working on that connection or there's distance, sometimes those connections just change, right? And then you meet them again 2 years later. And the thing is that when time and space pass, people change. And sometimes that change brings you together. And sometimes that change kind of puts you on different paths. And so I was telling her the story, this is my story, is that when I was growing up and I was in kindergarten, I started kindergarten. I was not, so I went to a majority white school. I'm a brown girl, to the brownness, right? I'm a brown girl, and I will say when I started kindergarten, I started 3 or 4 months late because my family had lived in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India for a year and a half. I was born in America, but when I was 4 and a half, my parents decided to take a sabbatical, took all 4 children, and we all lived in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India for a year and a half. It was an amazing experience, and I was surrounded by brown people. People look like me. Then I started kindergarten in Bethesda, Maryland, the whitest of white places. And it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't good. And there were cliquey white girls who made me feel less than. They bullied me. They made me feel really bad. And there was this one girl who was also a white girl, but she didn't. In fact, she stood up for me. And she happened to be someone who lived in my neighborhood, whom I actually had gone to nursery school with when I was 3. And so we knew each other from nursery school, but we weren't really friends at that point. And now, here we are, fast forward, kindergarten. So at that point, she became like my best friend. She stood up for me. She lived down the neighborhood, like in the neighborhood with me, so we hung out all the time. Then in 3rd grade, she told me, I remember it so clearly. We were walking around the big old field at school, you know, the soccer field, and she was like, my family is moving to Switzerland. Switzerland? Like, why, right? Her dad works for the government, or for foreign services, right? So they're moving to Switzerland, and they did. They moved to Switzerland, and so back in that time, and yes, I'm going to date myself, it's a long time ago, there was no computers, no email. It was all snail mail. And it was great. We kept in touch through letters, lots and lots of letters. And I loved letters from her. And we maintained a friendship for a really, really long time. We visited each other. I didn't visit her in Switzerland, but I visited her family when she came for summer breaks in New York. And I went and spent time with her extended family in New York. And and she came and stayed with me and my family. And and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful friendship. And I trusted her, because the truth of the matter is, what I didn't realize until recently is that trusting people is really hard for me, because there's just been so many people who have hurt me in my life that it takes a lot to trust someone as a friend. Just starting as a friend. I mean, let's not even go into relationships. Friendship, right? And trusting women particularly has been really hard for me for that reason too, because I've been hurt a lot of times by them. Seems like it's a universal thing to hurt me. So it doesn't matter your gender. But yeah, we broke off like after like middle school, right? Like, who's writing letters anymore? Like, you know, you're in the teenage years. I'm not like harped up on this friend from elementary school that I don't see regularly. So we didn't really keep a great deal in touch. We kind of did, but not a lot. Then in high school, 10th grade, she moves back. And she moves back. She still lives in the neighborhood that I live in, because we live in the same neighborhood. Like, I've always lived in the same neighborhood up until I was like, you know, a grown up. And we're friends. And like, we drive to school together, but like, we're not best friends anymore, right? She has a boyfriend now, and like, she has this whole nother group of friends. And we're in each other's lives, but we're not like close friends anymore, right? So it's like, this is another season of our friendship. And I say all that because I was trying to explain to my daughter that there's these seasons, right? Like, I appreciated her for the time that I had her. I learned so much about trust and friendship. I learned about standing up for people. I learned about, honestly, more about white culture from her than I've ever learned from anybody else, because I was able to be privy to like her home and these little things of like, you know, the differences that I had no idea about, like as her mother asking me to call her by her first name and being shocked by that, and the advent calendar, and what a second cousin once removed is. Like, it's like all these facts, these white culture facts that I didn't know, because I was a brown girl and I was surrounded by brown people, and I had a very deep, connected, extended family. So I didn't need friends in school the same way as maybe other people did, and I was okay with not having a lot of friends because I had my family. And so I remember where my story was going now. So that was the season, right? I learned something, I gained something. She taught me some things. I probably hopefully taught her some things, and I'm sure she learned a lot about Pakistani, Bangladeshi families and Muslim families, and right, like, she learned about me and I learned about her, and through that we expanded our lens and understanding of each other and the world around us and beyond us, right? But it was a season. She's still in my life. I read something at her wedding. But I wouldn't say she's like one of my close friends. She's certainly someone I'm going to make some time for if she comes into town and she wants to see me. But we're not besties. She's not someone who's on my caller ID. You know, like, I don't have her on speed dial. I'm not talking to her regularly. It's like a catch-up session of like, hey, where's your life? Where's my life, right? There's some depth to it, right? It's always depth. I don't do surface for anybody, which is why it takes a lot to trust, because you got to go deep if you're in my life. I can't do surface. But it's friendship. And it was a season, and I was appreciative of it. But then there are people, I think, that come into your life and then go out of your life and then maybe come back in. And maybe in that time period you've changed and you've grown. And in that growth, you actually are growing together. And that's a different season too. I've had some of those. I hope I have more. Friendship is complicated. Explaining friendship to young girls is even more complicated. But those seasons, I think we just have to appreciate them, just like we appreciate the seasons of the actual earth and environment, right? The sun, the birds, even the bees, the flowers. These are all our seasons. We exist and live through them, and we thrive. But we have to find the points of where there is beauty, there are lessons, there is some growth, and just appreciate it all. Because every place we are in our lives, wherever that is, whatever that is, we are meant to be there. And I'm truly, fully leaning into that as much as I can these days. Hope you enjoyed my writing today, presented to you in the form of a vlog. Follow me for more at browngirlinterrupting.com, which is my actual written blog, and follow me on Instagram, TikTok, which are my video vlogs, and follow my YouTube channel because I host a podcast where I talk about other people's stories, not just mine.